Hey there! Welcome back to English in Fluency, the channel where we turn everyday English into something you can actually use, actually feel, and actually remember. I'm Alex, and I am so glad you clicked on this video today because what we're about to do together is something a lot of English learners quietly struggle with, and almost nobody talks about it directly. We're going to talk about regret. Not the grammar textbook kind of regret, not "I regret to inform you," the cold, formal version you see in emails. I mean the real, human, heavy kind of regret. The kind that sits in someone's chest when they say, "I should have called her back." The kind that makes someone's voice drop a little when they say, "If only I had known." Today's lesson is a listening lesson, and it's built for B1 level English learners. So if you're at that stage where you understand a lot, but sometimes the feeling behind the words slips past you, this video was made for exactly that moment. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're not just going to know the words for regret. You're going to hear them coming. You're going to catch them in a conversation before the other person even finishes their sentence. And honestly, that skill, catching emotion inside ordinary English, is one of the most underrated superpowers a language learner can have. Before we jump into the story, let me tell you quickly why this matters so much. Because I don't want you to just memorize phrases today and forget them tomorrow. When native English speakers feel regret, they almost never say the word regret out loud. It's actually a bit rare in daily conversation. Instead, they use small phrases, quiet little grammar patterns that carry all that emotional weight. Things like, "I should have," "I wish I hadn't," "if only," "I never should have," "looking back," "in hindsight," "I can't believe I didn't." Or even just a long pause followed by a sigh and the words, "You know what? I messed that up." These patterns are everywhere in movies, in podcasts, in real conversations with friends, and if your ear isn't trained to catch them, you can completely miss the emotional core of what someone is telling you. You might understand every single word and still miss the point. So today, we train that ear together. Here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to tell you a story. It's a story about two old friends who bump into each other after many years apart. And through their conversation, regret comes up again and again, in different shapes, different tones, different intensities. I'll pause naturally through the story to point out the exact phrases that signal regret, explain what they mean, show you how they're used, and give you little moments to practice out loud. Yes, out loud. I really want you to speak during this video, not just listen. Repeating things with your own mouth and your own breath is what turns passive understanding into active memory. So find a quiet corner, don't worry about anyone hearing you, and let's get into it. Let me introduce you to our two characters for today. The first one is a man named Nathan. Nathan is 34 years old, and he grew up in a small coastal town. The kind of town where everybody knows everybody, where the smell of salt water follows you down every street, and where nothing much ever seems to change except the people who leave. Nathan left that town 12 years ago to study engineering in the city, and after graduating, he built a whole life there. A busy job, a small apartment, a routine that fills every hour so tightly that there's barely room to breathe, let alone to think about the past. The second character is a woman named Isla. Isla still lives in that same coastal town. She never left. She teaches art at the local school. She still visits the same bakery every Saturday morning. and she still remembers exactly who Nathan used to be before life in the city changed him. Isla and Nathan were best friends growing up, and for a short, golden stretch of their early 20s, they were something more than friends too, though neither of them ever really said it clearly at the time. Life pulled them in different directions, as life often does, and they lost touch. Not because of a big fight, not because of anything dramatic, just slowly, quietly, the way most friendships actually end, through distance and silence, and one unanswered message after another. Now, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, completely by accident, Nathan finds himself back in his hometown. His mother has been unwell, and he's come back for a few days to help her out and check on the old family house. He's tired. He's a little stressed from work. And he's not expecting anything emotional to happen on this trip. He just wants to fix a leaking roof, buy his mother some groceries, and go back to his normal city life. But while he's walking down the old main street, past the same shops that have barely changed in over a decade, he sees a woman stepping out of the bakery with a paper bag of bread under her arm. It's Isla. Older now, her hair a little shorter, but unmistakably her. For a second, Nathan just stands there frozen, and then he says her name out loud, almost without meaning to. Isla? She turns, and there's that pause, that split second where recognition slowly spreads across someone's face, and then a small laugh escapes her. Nathan? Oh my God. Nathan Cole. Is that actually you? They stand on the pavement for a moment, just looking at each other, both a little stunned, both suddenly aware of how much time has passed. And this is where our listening practice really begins, because Isla says something that we need to slow down and look at carefully. She says, I can't believe it's been this long. I always meant to reach out, you know. I just never did. Let's pause right here for our first real teaching moment. Did you catch it? I always meant to reach out. I just never did. This is a soft, gentle way of expressing regret, and it's incredibly common in real English conversation. When someone says, I meant to do something, they're telling you that they had the intention, the plan, the wish to do it. But it simply never happened. And notice how she doesn't say, I regret not reaching out. Nobody really talks like that in casual conversation. Instead, the regret is hidden inside a much softer structure. I meant to, plus a verb, followed by, I just never did, or I just didn't get around to it. Try saying this with me right now, out loud, in your own voice. I always meant to call you back. I just never did. Say it again, a little slower this time, and really feel the small weight of disappointment in your own voice as you say it. That little heaviness, that little dip in tone, that's the emotional color of regret. And once you can produce it yourself, you'll start hearing it instantly in others. Nathan smiles, a bit awkwardly, because he feels exactly the same thing, and he admits it honestly. Honestly? Me too. I kept thinking about messaging you, and then life just got in the way. Here's another common pattern for us to notice. Life got in the way. This phrase doesn't sound like regret at first glance, but in context, it absolutely is. It's a soft excuse, a gentle way of saying, I didn't do the thing I should have done, and I feel a little bad about that, but I'm also being kind to myself about it. English speakers use phrases like this constantly to admit a mistake without sounding overly dramatic or guilty. It keeps the emotional tone light, friendly, human. Try repeating it. Life just got in the way. Notice the rhythm, the way the sentence flows smoothly, almost like a shrug turned into words. They decide to walk together toward the small park near the harbor, the same park where they used to sit on a particular wooden bench as teenagers, talking for hours about nothing and everything at the same time. As they walk, Isla asks him gently, "So, how's the city treating you? Last I heard, you were doing really well over there." Nathan lets out a short laugh, not a happy one, more of a tired one, and says, "I mean, work is good, I guess. Busy. Really busy. Actually, looking back, I think I let it take over everything else in my life." And there it is, our next major phrase. Looking back. This is one of the single most important expressions for expressing regret in English, and I want you to really lock this one into your memory today. Looking back is used when someone is reflecting on the past from their current point in time, usually to admit that they now see something differently than they did back then. It often comes right before an honest confession, a realization, or a regret. For example, looking back, I probably shouldn't have quit that job. Or, looking back, I wish I had spent more time with my grandmother while she was still healthy. Or in Nathan's case, looking back, I think I let work take over everything else in my life. Notice the structure. Looking back, comma, then a full sentence, often containing words like should have, shouldn't have, wish, or I think I. Let's practice this together. Repeat after me. Looking back, I wish I had called more often. Now try your own version, maybe about something small in your own life. Pause the video for 10 seconds if you want, and quietly say your own sentence starting with looking back. This kind of small personal practice is what makes language stick. Isla nods slowly, and there's a thoughtful silence between them for a moment before she says something that clearly costs her a little bit of courage. "Can I be honest with you about something? I've actually thought about you a lot over the years. More than I probably should admit." Nathan glances at her, surprised, and she continues. "There was a period, right before you left for the city, where I think we both knew there was something between us, and I never said anything. I told myself it wasn't the right time, that you were about to start this huge new chapter of your life, and I didn't want to complicate it. But if I'm honest, I think that was just fear talking, and I've regretted staying quiet ever since. This moment right here gives us one of the clearest, most direct regret expressions in the entire English language. I regret. It's actually less common in daily speech than the softer expressions we've already covered, because saying I regret directly can feel quite strong, quite formal, almost dramatic. That's exactly why, when someone does say it plainly, like Isla just did, it hits differently. It signals that the emotion is real, deep, and honestly acknowledged, not just brushed aside with a joke or a shrug. I've regretted staying quiet ever since. Notice the structure, subject, plus have regretted, plus a gerund, the ing form of the verb, plus ever since, which tells us this feeling has continued from that moment all the way to today. Let's slow this down and repeat it together. I've regretted staying quiet ever since. Try it again, and this time, let your voice actually soften and slow down slightly on the word regretted, because that's usually how native speakers deliver emotionally heavy words like this one. The pace of speech itself becomes part of the meaning. Nathan is quiet for a second, taking this in, And then he says something that lets a bit of his own guarded honesty come through, too. I felt it too, you know. I think I convinced myself that leaving meant I had to leave everything behind completely, including you. I told myself it was the mature thing to do. Focus on my career. Don't get distracted. But if I could go back, I would have at least talked to you about it instead of just disappearing. Here we get another incredibly useful pattern. If I could go back, I would have. This is a hypothetical structure, describing an imaginary situation in the past that didn't actually happen, paired with a wish to change it. It's very similar to if only, which we'll get to in just a moment, but it has its own particular flavor. It often appears when someone imagines physically returning to a moment in time to fix something. If I could go back, I would have told her the truth. If I could go back, I wouldn't have said those words. Try saying this sentence with me. If I could go back, I would have talked to you properly, instead of just disappearing. Feel how the sentence carries both imagination and sadness at the same time. That combination, imagining an alternate past while knowing it's impossible, is really the emotional heart of regret in English. They reach the old wooden bench by the harbor and sit down, the wind gently moving the water in front of them, seagulls calling somewhere in the distance. There's a comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only happens between people who once knew each other extremely well, even after years apart. Then Isla says something quieter, more personal, more painful than what came before. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Not even my own family? Nathan nods, giving her space to continue. When your dad passed away 4 years ago, I wanted to come to the funeral so badly. I actually got in my car and started driving toward the church. And then, about halfway there, I turned around and went home instead. I don't even fully understand why. I think I was scared of how it would feel to see you grieving. Scared that I'd cry too much. Scared it would be awkward after everything unsaid between us. And I have never forgiven myself for turning that car around. I should have been there for you. I really should have. This next phrase, I should have, is probably the single most common, most essential regret expression in all of English. And if you remember only one thing from today's lesson, please let it be this one. Should have is used to describe something that was the right or better choice, but that the speaker did not do. It's often shortened in natural spoken English to should've, which sounds almost like shoulda, when spoken quickly and casually. I should have called her. I should have studied harder. I should have been there. The opposite version, shouldn't have, describes an action the speaker did do, but now wishes they hadn't. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have left so early. Both forms are absolutely everywhere in real English conversation. In movies, in songs, in arguments, in quiet confessions exactly like the one Isla just made. Let's really drill this one, because it's that important. Repeat after me, slowly. I should have been there for you. Now a little faster, more naturally. I should have been there for you. Now try the negative version. I shouldn't have turned the car around. One more time, with feeling this time, imagine you're actually confessing something you deeply regret. I shouldn't have turned the car around. Nathan reaches over and gently puts a hand on her shoulder, and his voice softens considerably. Isla, listen to me. You don't have to carry that. Grief makes people do strange, unexplainable things. I wasn't even fully present at my own father's funeral, if I'm honest. I was so overwhelmed that half of it is just a blur to me now. But there's something I want to admit to you too. Something I've been sitting with for years. Isla looks at him, waiting. After the funeral, I went back to the city almost immediately, within 2 days. And I told myself it was because of work, because I had responsibilities, deadlines, all of that. But honestly, looking back, I think I just didn't know how to sit still with the grief. I didn't know how to be around my mother while she cried every single day. So I ran back to a place where I could distract myself with meetings and emails and pretend everything was fine. And I regret that more than almost anything else in my life. I regret not staying longer with my mom when she needed me the most. Notice something interesting happening here. Nathan uses both looking back and I regret in the same short passage, layering these expressions together the way real people actually do in emotional conversations. This is incredibly common. Regret rarely comes out in one single tidy sentence. It tends to spill out gradually, one phrase building on another, each one adding a little more honesty than the last. Let's practice combining these structures together, the way Nathan just did. Try this sentence with me. Looking back, I regret not staying longer. Say it once more, a bit slower, letting the weight of both phrases land together. Looking back, I regret not staying longer. Isla is quiet for a moment, processing what he's just shared, and then she says something gentle but firm. You were grieving too, Nathan. You don't have to be so hard on yourself. But I do think, if it's not too late, you should tell your mom that. Not me. Her. I think she needs to hear that you regret leaving so quickly, that it wasn't because you didn't care. Nathan nods slowly and admits, You're right. I've been putting that conversation off for years now. If only I had said something the very next time I visited, instead of just letting the silence between us grow every single year. And here we arrive at another absolutely essential regret phrase, if only. This expression is used to express a strong wish that something in the past had happened differently, almost always carrying real sadness or frustration with it. If only I had studied harder. If only I had told her how I felt. If only I had listened to my parents' advice. The structure is simple. If only plus subject plus had plus the past participle of the verb. It's often followed by a comma, and then a second sentence describing how different things would be now, though that second part is optional in casual speech. Often people just leave the sentence hanging with if only, letting the silence afterward speak for itself. Let's practice this together. Repeat after me. If only I had said something sooner. Now try it with a different ending. If only I had told her the truth back then. One more time, and this time, really pause after the word only, the way people naturally do when they're feeling that regret rise up in their chest. If only I had said something sooner. They sit there together for a long while, watching small fishing boats drift lazily in the harbor, and eventually Isla asks him something practical, something that shifts the conversation gently forward. How long are you staying this time? Nathan hesitates, then answers honestly. Originally, I planned just 3 days. Fix the roof, buy groceries, head back. But now, sitting here, talking to you, I'm starting to think 3 days really isn't enough. I think I need more time here, with my mom, with this town. Maybe even with you, if that's something you'd want. Isla smiles, a real warm smile this time, The heaviness of earlier lifting just slightly. I'd like that. And Nathan? For what it's worth, I don't think it's too late for any of this. Not for your mom, not for us, not for anything. I think regret only becomes permanent when we let it stop us from doing anything differently going forward. This is such an important point for us to notice as language learners, and, honestly, as people too. Regret expressions in English almost always describe the past, using structures like should have, shouldn't have, if only, I regret, looking back, I meant to. But very often, in real conversations, these expressions are followed by a shift toward the present or future, a kind of turning point where the speaker decides to do something differently now. Isla's sentence captures this perfectly. I don't think it's too late for any of this. This phrase, it's not too late, is basically the emotional opposite of regret. Or, maybe more accurately, it's the answer to regret. It's what people say when they want to acknowledge the past mistake honestly, but also refuse to let it control the future. Let's practice this hopeful counterpart too, because understanding regret fully means understanding both sides of it. Repeat with me. It's not too late to fix this. Try it again. It's not too late to make things right. Nathan takes a slow breath, and for the first time since arriving in town, he actually seems to relax a little. You know, he says, I think part of why I've avoided coming back here so often is because being here forces me to face all the things I've been avoiding. My mom's health, this town, you. It's easier to just stay busy in the city and not think about any of it. But avoiding regret doesn't actually make it disappear, does it? It just kind of sits there, waiting. Isla nods thoughtfully. No, it doesn't disappear. I think I've learned that the hard way myself. For years I told myself I was fine, that I'd made peace with not reaching out to you, with not coming to the funeral. But the truth is, I just buried it, instead of dealing with it. And it kept coming up anyway, usually late at night, or whenever someone mentioned your name. Let's take a small pause from the story here for a quick but important teaching moment about listening skills specifically, since that's really the heart of today's lesson. When you're listening to real English conversations, whether in movies, podcasts, YouTube videos like this one, or real life, regret often doesn't announce itself loudly. It hides in small words like actually, honestly, if I'm honest, to be fair, or even just a longer pause before a sentence. Nathan and Isla have used phrases like if I'm honest and honestly several times throughout this conversation, and each time it's a small verbal signal that something emotionally important, often something regretful, is about to be said. So here's a practical listening tip for you. Whenever you hear someone say, honestly, or to be honest, or if I'm honest, get ready, because what follows is very often either a confession, an admission of a mistake, or a piece of genuine regret that the person has been holding back. Train your ear to catch that little verbal doorway, and you'll understand the emotional layer of conversations far more clearly, even at your current B1 level. As the afternoon light starts to soften over the harbor, Nathan checks his phone and realizes he should probably head back to check on his mother. Before they part ways, Isla says one more thing that ties together everything we've learned today. Nathan, I just want to say, I'm really glad we ran into each other today. I think we both needed to say some of these things out loud, finally, instead of just carrying them around silently for years. I know we can't undo the past. We can't go back and change the years we lost touch, or the funeral I didn't attend, or the conversation we never had before you left. But I don't want to look back in another 10 years and have even more regrets to add to the pile. So, can we at least try? Stay in touch properly this time? No more just meaning to call and never doing it? Nathan laughs softly at that last part, recognizing his own earlier words being gently thrown back at him, and he says, "Deal. And this time, I actually mean it, not just meaning to mean it." They both laugh at that, a genuine, easy laugh that seems to release some of the old heaviness between them. Before they part ways at the edge of the park, Nathan adds one final thought. You know, I think the biggest lesson I'm taking from today isn't really about you, or my mom, or even the funeral. It's that regret only really hurts us long-term when we let silence protect it. The moment we actually say these things out loud, admit them honestly, like we just did, it starts to lose some of its grip. I think I needed this conversation more than I realized. Isla nods in agreement, and with a warm, simple, "See you soon," they part ways, both walking home a little lighter than they arrived. Now, before we leave the story completely, I want to take you a little further, because there's one more scene that really rounds out this whole conversation, and it gives us a few more regret expressions that are absolutely worth knowing. A couple of days later, Nathan is at his mother's house, sitting at the kitchen table while she prepares tea. Her movements slower now than he remembers, her hands a little more careful with the kettle than they used to be. Her name is Margaret, and she's been living alone in that house since Nathan's father passed away 4 years ago. Nathan watches her for a moment, and something in his chest tightens. That familiar guilt creeping back in, the one he and Isla talked about at the harbor. He finally says it, the thing he's been putting off for years. "Mom, can I talk to you about something?" Margaret sets the teapot down and takes a seat across from him, giving him her full attention the way mothers often do, the instant they sense something important is coming. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Nathan takes a breath and says, "I've been thinking a lot lately about how quickly I left after Dad's funeral. I went back to the city within 2 days, and I never really explained why, or apologized for it. And the truth is, I don't think I handled that well. I regret rushing off the way I did. I should have stayed longer. I should have sat with you through those first difficult weeks instead of hiding behind work." Margaret is quiet for a moment, her eyes softening, and then she says something Nathan clearly wasn't expecting. "Nathan, I always wondered if you blamed yourself for that. I want you to know, I never once thought you didn't care. Grief does strange things to people. But if I'm honest, I do wish we'd talked about it sooner, instead of both of us just quietly avoiding the subject for 4 years. Notice here, once again, that phrase, "if I'm honest," acting exactly as our earlier verbal doorway, signaling that something emotionally important is about to follow. And right after, it comes another regret expression. "I wish we'd talked about it sooner." This uses the structure "I wish" plus subject plus had, often contracted to D plus the past participle. "I wish we'd talked about it." "I wish I'd known." "I wish she'd told me the truth." Let's practice this together, since "I wish" is another absolutely core regret pattern that deserves real attention. Repeat after me. "I wish we'd talked about it sooner." Try it once more. slightly slower, letting the softness come through the way Margaret's voice naturally would. I wish we'd talked about it sooner. Nathan reaches across the table and takes his mother's hand, and he says, I'm here now, though, and I think, moving forward, I want to visit more often. Not just when there's a problem to fix, like a leaking roof. I want to actually be present, actually spend time with you, instead of always rushing back to the city the moment something's done. Margaret smiles, her eyes glistening slightly, and she says, I'd like that very much. And Nathan, for what it's worth, I don't regret raising you to be independent, even if it meant you moved far away. I just regret that independence sometimes looked like distance between us. I think there's a difference, and I wish I'd noticed that difference sooner myself. This gives us a lovely, slightly more advanced version of the pattern where regret appears twice in a row, once in the positive and once in the negative, contrasting two related feelings within the same thought. I don't regret raising you independent, but I do regret that it created distance. This kind of contrast, using don't regret against do regret, is a wonderfully natural way native speakers organize more complicated emotional thoughts. It shows that regret isn't always simple. Sometimes people regret one part of a decision while still standing firmly behind another part of it. Let's practice this a little. Try saying, I don't regret moving to a new city, but I do regret losing touch with my old friends. Notice how the sentence holds two feelings at once, without contradiction, the way real human emotions often work. Later that evening, once his mother has gone to bed, Nathan sits alone on the back porch, looking out over the dark water in the distance, and he takes out his phone. He scrolls through his contacts until he finds Isla's name, still saved from years ago, and after a long moment of hesitation, he sends her a simple message. Thank you for today. I talked to my mom, like you suggested. It went better than I expected. I think I have a lot of regret to slowly let go of, but for the first time in years, it feels like something I can actually work through, instead of just quietly carrying around forever. A few minutes later, Isla replies, I'm really proud of you for having that conversation. And for what it's worth, I think admitting regret honestly, out loud, to the person involved is usually the bravest and hardest part. Everything after that tends to get a little easier. Nathan smiles at his phone screen in the quiet dark and types back, Maybe we could get coffee properly before I head back to the city this time. Actual plans, not just an accidental run-in on the street. Isla responds almost instantly. I would really like that. And Nathan? No more just meaning to see each other. Let's actually put it in both our calendars this time. He laughs softly to himself, alone on the porch, and replies simply, Deal. Let's pause here for one more quick teaching moment before we return fully to our summary, because this final little exchange gives us a lovely, gentle example of moving from regret into action, which is really the emotional destination we want to reach by the end of any regret-focused conversation. Isla's phrase, admitting regret honestly, is usually the bravest and hardest part. Everything after that tends to get a little easier, captures something true about both language and life. Once the regret has been spoken clearly and directly, using patterns like the ones we've studied today, the emotional weight tends to lighten. This is actually one of the reasons these expressions exist so richly in English in the first place. Language gives us a structured, socially acceptable way to release difficult feelings instead of letting them sit silently, unspoken, for years. All right, let's step fully out of the story now and gather together everything we've learned today, because I want to make sure this really sticks with you. Throughout Nathan and Isla's conversation, we identified several major ways that English speakers signal regret, and I want to go through each one clearly, one more time, with fresh examples, so you leave this video feeling genuinely confident. The first pattern was, I meant to, followed by a verb, and then, usually, but I never did, or but I didn't get around to it. This describes an intention that was never carried out. For example, I meant to visit my grandmother more often, but I never did. Or, she meant to apologize, but she just never found the right moment. The second pattern was looking back, used at the start of a sentence to introduce a reflection on the past, often paired with should have, shouldn't have, or I wish. For example, looking back, I probably should have chosen a different university. Or, looking back, I wish I hadn't argued with him that day. The third pattern was the direct use of I regret, followed by a gerund, the ing form of a verb. This is a stronger, more formal-sounding expression, often used when someone wants to clearly and honestly name their emotional pain. For example, I regret not telling her how I felt. Or, he regrets leaving his job so suddenly. The fourth pattern, and honestly the most common one in everyday English, was should have, and its negative form, shouldn't have. These describe actions that either should have happened but didn't, or shouldn't have happened but did. For example, I should have studied more before the exam. Or, we shouldn't have waited so long to talk about this. The fifth pattern was if only, used to express a strong emotional wish about changing the past, often left slightly unfinished or trailing off, since the emotion itself is usually more important than completing the grammar perfectly. For example, if only I had listened to my instincts, or simply, if only things had been different. And finally, the sixth pattern, which acts almost like the answer to regret rather than regret itself, was it's not too late, used to acknowledge a past mistake honestly, while still choosing to move forward positively. For example, it's not too late to reconnect with an old friend. Or, it's not too late to change your career path. I also want to spend a little extra time on something that's just as important as the words themselves. And that's the way these regret expressions actually sound when a real person says them. Because in a listening lesson, sound matters just as much as vocabulary. If you go back through Nathan and Isla's conversation in your head, you'll notice that regret is almost never spoken quickly or flatly. There's usually a slight slowing down right before the regret word appears, and often a small pause right after it too, almost like the speaker is giving themselves a moment to actually feel what they're saying. Think about the difference between someone saying, I should have called you, in a fast, casual, throwaway tone, versus someone saying it slowly, with a dip in their voice on the word should, followed by a tiny pause before called you. The words are identical, but the second version clearly carries real emotional weight, while the first might just sound like a passing comment. As a listener, learning to notice this change of pace and tone is honestly just as valuable as recognizing the grammar itself, because it tells you how much a person actually means what they're saying. Let's also talk for a moment about contractions, because in fast, natural spoken English, many of these regret expressions get shortened in ways that can trip up a learner's ear if you're not expecting them. Should have very often becomes should've, which sounds close to shoulda in relaxed speech. Would have becomes would've, sounding like woulda. Could have becomes could've, sounding like coulda. And I wish I had often becomes I wish I'd, with that D sound almost disappearing into the following word. So when you're listening to real conversations, whether in movies, in interviews, or in everyday chats between English speakers, don't expect to hear a clean, textbook, I should have. You're much more likely to hear something closer to I should have called, spoken quickly and naturally. Training your ear for these reduced natural forms is honestly one of the biggest jumps you can make from understanding textbook English to understanding real spoken English. Let me give you a short practice dialogue now, a fresh one, completely separate from Nathan and Isla's story, just so you can test how well you're catching these patterns in a different context. Imagine two co-workers, let's call them Daniel and Priya, talking during a lunch break at their office. Daniel says, "Hey, did you hear the company's launching that new project you were interested in last year?" Priya sighs and says, "Yeah, I saw that. Honestly, it kind of stings a little. I applied for a similar position last year and didn't get it. And looking back, I don't think I prepared properly for that interview at all. I should have practiced more, should have researched the company better. I just walked in thinking my experience alone would carry me through, and it clearly didn't." Daniel nods sympathetically and says, "That's rough, but hey, it's not too late, right? You could still apply for this new one." Priya considers this for a moment and replies, "That's true. I guess if I'm honest, I've been a little scared to try again after being rejected the first time. But you're right. Sitting here regretting the past interview isn't going to help me get the next one." Did you catch all the patterns in that short dialogue? Let's go through it quickly together. Priya used looking back, followed immediately by should've, used twice in a row for emphasis. Should have practiced more, should have researched the company better. Then Daniel used our positive counterpart, it's not too late, to gently redirect the conversation toward action instead of dwelling only on the past. And finally, Priya used if I'm honest as that familiar verbal doorway, signaling one more small, honest admission before wrapping up the thought. Notice how naturally these expressions blend together in a completely ordinary, everyday workplace conversation. Nothing dramatic, nothing like a soap opera, just two co-workers chatting during lunch. This is exactly the kind of everyday English where these patterns show up constantly, which is precisely why learning to catch them matters so much for your overall listening comprehension. Let's try one more quick dialogue, this time between a mother and her adult daughter, just to show you how flexible these expressions are across completely different relationships and situations. The daughter, whose name is Sarah, says to her mother, "Mom, I've been thinking about switching careers, maybe going back to study nursing." Her mother, whose name is Diane, responds warmly, "Really? What's making you consider that now?" Sarah answers honestly, "I don't know. I guess I've just been unhappy at my current job for a while, and if I'm honest, I regret not pursuing nursing straight out of high school. Everyone told me it would be too difficult, too much studying, and I let that scare me away from something I actually wanted. Diane says gently, "Well, for what it's worth, I don't think it's ever too late to change direction. And honestly, looking back, I probably should have encouraged you more back then, instead of just going along with everyone else's opinion. I regret that a little myself." Notice, once again, how naturally regret flows in both directions here, from daughter to mother, and mother to daughter, each admitting a small, honest truth about the past, while still gently pointing toward the possibility of change in the present. This really reflects how regret actually works in real human relationships. It's rarely just one person's burden. Often, when one person opens up honestly about something they wish had gone differently, it invites the other person to do the same, creating a shared moment of honesty rather than a one-sided confession. Now, let's shift gears slightly and talk about a few smaller, supporting phrases that often travel alongside our 6 main regret expressions, because recognizing these will sharpen your listening even further. The phrase "in hindsight" works almost identically to "looking back," and you'll hear both used interchangeably by English speakers. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have taken that job. In hindsight, moving to a new city that quickly wasn't the smartest decision. Another useful phrase is, "I can't believe I didn't," which expresses a mix of regret and surprise at oneself, almost frustration at your own past actions. "I can't believe I didn't ask for help sooner." "I can't believe I didn't notice the signs earlier." There's also, "What was I thinking?" a rhetorical question people ask themselves, almost never expecting an actual answer, purely to express disbelief and regret about a past decision. What was I thinking? Quitting without a backup plan? And finally, there's the phrase, "I let this go on for too long," used specifically when regret involves not just a single decision, but a pattern of inaction stretched out over time, exactly like Nathan and Isla's years of silence, or Nathan and his mother's years of unspoken feelings. "I let this misunderstanding go on for way too long." We let the distance between us grow for too long. Let's practice all 4 of these supporting phrases together quickly, just to round things out. Repeat after me. In hindsight, I should have asked more questions. Now this one. I can't believe I didn't call her back sooner. Now this one. What was I thinking, ignoring all those warning signs? And finally, this one. I let that argument go on for way too long without addressing it. Notice how naturally all of these slot into the emotional pattern we've been building throughout this entire lesson: past mistake, honest reflection, and often a gentle push toward doing better going forward. Now here's your practice challenge for today, and I really want you to actually do this, not just watch me say it and move on. Think of one small regret from your own life. It doesn't need to be huge or dramatic. It can be something as simple as not learning to cook earlier, or not calling an old friend back, or not practicing your English speaking more consistently before today. Once you have that memory in your mind, try building 3 separate sentences about it using 3 different patterns from today's lesson. Start with "looking back," then try "I should have" or "I shouldn't have," and finish with "if only." Say all 3 out loud, slowly, really feeling the emotional weight behind each one, the way Nathan and Isla did throughout their conversation. This kind of personal, emotional practice is honestly one of the fastest ways to make new English patterns permanent in your memory, because you're not just repeating abstract grammar, you're attaching it to something real and personal to you. I also want to encourage you to rewatch the story section of this video at least once more, this time trying to predict, just slightly before it happens, when a regret expression is coming. Listen for those small verbal signals we talked about. Words like honestly, actually, if I am honest, or a noticeably longer pause before a sentence begins. The more you train your ear this way, the more naturally you'll start catching these emotional cues in real conversations, in movies, in podcasts, and eventually in your own conversations with English speakers. Before we wrap up completely, let me give you a few more natural examples. Quickly, just to round out your understanding, since the more varied examples your brain hears, the stronger the pattern becomes. Someone might say, honestly, I wish I had traveled more when I was younger, before all my responsibilities piled up. Someone else might say, I should have told my boss sooner instead of letting the problem grow. A parent might tell their child years later, looking back, I probably worked too much and missed a lot of your childhood, and I regret that deeply. A friend might admit, if only I had asked for help instead of trying to handle everything alone. And someone trying to move forward positively might say, it's not too late for me to go back to school, even at my age. Notice how naturally these phrases fit into completely different situations: careers, relationships, family, personal growth. Once you truly understand these patterns, you'll start noticing them absolutely everywhere in English. Now, I know today's lesson touched some genuinely emotional territory: family, lost time, unspoken feelings, and I did that intentionally, because language sticks best when it's attached to real emotion, not just dry grammar rules sitting flatly on a page. If this story moved you even a little, or if you recognized a small piece of your own life somewhere inside Nathan and Isla's conversation, I would genuinely love to hear about it. Scroll down right now and leave a comment telling me one small regret you have, using one of the patterns we practiced today. Maybe start with looking back, or I should have, or if only. I read every single comment on these videos, and honestly, some of the most touching, most human stories on this entire channel have come from viewers just like you, sharing a small, honest piece of their own life in the comments section. If this lesson helped you hear English a little more clearly today, if it helped you catch emotions hiding inside ordinary words, please take a moment to hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more learners just like you who are working hard every day to improve their English. And if you haven't already, subscribe to English in Fluency and make sure to tap that notification bell, because every single week we bring you new listening lessons exactly like this one: real conversations, real emotions, real English, broken down clearly and gently so that you can understand not just the words, but the feelings underneath them. Share this video with a friend who's also learning English, someone who might benefit from hearing how regret really sounds in natural conversation. And if there's a particular emotion or topic you'd like us to explore in a future listening lesson, maybe apology, maybe gratitude, maybe excitement or nervousness, drop that suggestion in the comments too, because this channel genuinely grows around what you, our learners, actually need and want to understand. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I know English listening practice can sometimes feel slow or frustrating, especially when emotions and cultural nuance get mixed into the language itself. But you did wonderful work today, sticking with a fairly long, fairly deep lesson. And that kind of consistent effort really is exactly how fluency gets built. One honest conversation at a time. Keep practicing. Keep listening closely. Keep noticing those small emotional signals hiding inside everyday English. And I promise it will keep getting easier and more natural for you. Until next time, this is Alex from English in Fluency, wishing you clear ears, a warm heart, and steady, confident progress on your English journey. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next lesson.